The sun was already beating down mercilessly at 8 a.m. when I pulled my truck into the gravel driveway on Maple Street. Cedar Falls, Iowa wasn't known for its brutal summer heat, but this August was different. I grabbed my toolbox from the bed of my Ford F-150 and surveyed the job ahead of me. Mrs. Helena. Winters had called 3 days ago about her backyard. Fence storm damage from the tornado warnings we'd been getting all month. What I didn't expect was what she'd ask me by the end of the day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fence was worse than I'd imagined. 60 feet of cedar planks twisted and splintered like matchsticks, posts leaning at impossible angles. I'd been doing handyman work around Cedar Falls for 12 years, ever since I'd moved here from Detroit. After my divorce, and I'd seen plenty of storm damage. But this looked like Mother Nature had taken a sledgehammer to it personally. I was measuring the damaged section when I heard the screen door creak open behind me. Helena Winters stepped onto her back porch, and I couldn't help but notice she looked different from when I had met her 3 days ago. She was wearing a flowing yellow sundress instead of the practical jeans and work shirt she'd had on during our initial consultation. Her silver hair was styled in soft waves rather than pulled back in the no-nonsense ponytail I remembered. "Morning, Jake," she called out, her voice carrying a brightness that seemed to match her outfit. "Hope you brought your appetite." I made. "Enough coffee and breakfast for a small army?" I tipped my baseball cap. "Morning, Mrs. Winters." "Coffee sounds great, but you don't need to go to any trouble, Helena," she corrected with a smile. "And it's no trouble at all. Besides, it's a special day." I didn't think much of it at the time. Folks in small towns were always celebrating something. Graduations, anniversaries, church fundraisers. I focused on sorting through my tools and planning my approach to the fence repair. The damage was extensive, but not impossible. 3 posts would need complete replacement, and about 40 feet of cedar planking would have to be rebuilt from scratch. The hardware store on Main Street would have most of what I needed, but specialty items might require a trip too. Des Moines. Helena returned with a steaming mug of coffee and a plate of homemade blueberry muffins. The coffee was strong and perfectly brewed, and the muffins were still warm from the oven. "These are incredible," I said, taking a generous bite.
My ex-wife used to bake, but nothing like this."
"Secret ingredient," Helena said with a wink. "Love. And a pinch of cinnamon." As I worked, Helena busied herself in her garden. Her backyard was impressive. Rows of tomatoes, peppers, and corn stretching toward the property line. Flower beds bursting with marigolds and petunias, and a small herb garden that filled the air with the scent of basil and rosemary. She moved through it with the confidence of someone who'd been tending the same soil for decades. "How long have you lived here?" I asked during a water break. 32 years, she replied, deadheading some roses near the porch. "Moved here with my husband Robert when he got transferred to the insurance office downtown. He passed away 4 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss." Lena paused in her gardening and looked at me directly. "Thank you. Robert was a good man. Steady, reliable, always did right by everyone. We had a good life together." There was something in her tone, not sadness exactly, but a kind of wistfulness that made me wonder what she wasn't saying. By noon, I'd removed all the damaged planking and was working on extracting the broken posts. The Iowa heat was relentless, and sweat was pouring down my back despite the shade from Helena's oak trees. She appeared at my elbow with a glass of ice water and a turkey sandwich. "You need to stay hydrated in this heat," she said. "Weather forecast says it might hit 95 degrees today." "It feels like it's already there," I replied. Accepting the water gratefully, Helena settled into a lawn chair nearby, watching me work. Usually, I preferred to work alone. Customers hovering around asking questions and offering suggestions generally slowed things down. But Helena was different. She seemed content to observe, without interfering, occasionally making comments about the weather or asking about my techniques. "You're very methodical," she observed, as I carefully measured and marked the locations. "For the new posts, measure twice, cut once," I replied. My father taught me that when I was helping him build a deck when I was 16. Never forgot it. Smart man, your father. He was a Navy veteran, worked construction for 40 years, never met a problem he couldn't solve with the right tools and enough patience. Helena smiled. Robert was like that too. Could fix anything around the house. I learned a lot just watching him work. The afternoon wore on, and I made good progress on the fence. The new posts were set in concrete and would need to cure overnight, but I'd managed to get about half the new planking installed. Helena had disappeared into the house around 2 o'clock, and I could hear sounds of activity from the kitchen running water. The oven door opening and closing, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables around 4 o'clock, the most incredible smell began wafting from the house. It was rich and savory, with hints of garlic and herbs that made my stomach growl despite the sandwich I had for lunch. Helena emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of fresh lemonade. Getting hungry? She asked. Whatever you're cooking smells amazing, I admitted. A bourguignon. It's been simmering all afternoon. I thought maybe you'd like to stay for dinner when you're finished with the fence. I was surprised by the invitation. In all my years doing handyman work, customers occasionally offered a sandwich or a cold drink, but a home-cooked dinner was unusual, especially one that clearly required hours of preparation. That's very generous, but I don't want to impose, I said. You wouldn't be imposing. I made far too much for one person anyway. As the day progressed, I found myself looking forward to the dinner invitation more than I probably should have. Helena was easy to talk to, and there was something peaceful about working in her yard. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional car passing on Maple Street and the sound of children playing in a nearby yard. By 6 o'clock, I'd finished installing the last of the fence planking. The job wasn't completely done. I still needed to apply stain and install the gate hardware, but the structural work was complete. The fence looked solid and straight, a significant improvement over the storm-damaged mess I'd started with that morning. I was cleaning up my tools when Helena appeared on the porch again. She'd changed clothes once more, this time into an elegant blue dress that complemented her silver hair beautifully. She was wearing subtle makeup and jewelry I hadn't noticed earlier. Perfect timing, she said. Dinner's ready. Lena's dining room was warm and inviting, with a polished oak table set for two. She'd used her good china and crystal glasses, and there were fresh flowers from her garden in a vase at the center of the table. The beef bourguignon was every bit as delicious as it had smelled, served alongside roasted vegetables and crusty French bread. This is restaurant quality, I said after my first bite. Where did you learn to cook like this? Years of practice, Helena replied. Robert appreciated good food, so I made it a point to learn. I took classes, read cookbooks, and experimented on weekends. It became a passion. Talked about cooking, about Cedar Falls, about the changes we'd both witnessed in the small town. Over the years, Helena was an engaging conversationalist, well-read and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard several times. As we finished dinner, Helena excused herself to the kitchen and returned with a chocolate cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The frosting was perfectly smooth, decorated with delicate rosettes and what appeared to be handmade chocolate curls. I hope you saved room for dessert, she said, setting the cake on the table. Did you make this today too? I asked, incredulous. Helena smiled mysteriously. I've been busy. The cake was as impressive as it looked. Rich chocolate layers with a silky buttercream frosting that melted on the tongue. As I savored a generous slice, I found myself wondering why Helena had gone too. Such elaborate trouble for a simple fence repair job. Helena, I said carefully, this has been an incredible meal, but I have to ask, what's the occasion? This seems like a lot of effort for a handyman. Helena set down her fork and looked at me directly. Her expression was serious, but there was something else in her eyes, a kind of nervous energy I hadn't seen before. Jake, she said slowly, there's something I need to tell you. The words hung in the air between us like morning fog over the Cedar River. Helena's hands were folded in her lap, and I could see her knuckles were white with tension. Whatever she was about to tell me had been weighing on her mind all day. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Turned 50 today, she said quietly. This whole day, the dress, the elaborate meals, the dinner, it's because today's my birthday. I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. Helena, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have brought flowers or a card or something. You shouldn't have spent your birthday cooking for, she held up a hand to stop me. That's not what I'm getting at, Jake. Let me finish. I nodded and waited, though something in her tone made my chest tighten with anticipation. Helena took a deep breath and met my eyes. I've been alone for 4 years now. For birthdays, sitting at this same table, eating dinner by myself, blowing out candles on a cake that only I would eat. And this morning, when I woke up and realized I was turning 50 today, I made a decision. Paused, reaching for her water glass with hands that trembled slightly. I decided I didn't want to spend another birthday alone. When you showed up this morning to fix my fence, it felt like maybe the universe was giving me an opportunity. The chocolate cake suddenly tasted like sawdust in my mouth. God. Sense where this conversation was heading, but I couldn't quite believe it. Double quotes. Helena. I started, but she continued. I know this is forward. I know we barely know each other. But Jake, I've been watching you work all day, and you're kind and respectful and skilled with your hands. You made me laugh 3 times today. Real laughter, not the polite kind I do at church functions. When you talked about your father, I could see the love and respect in your eyes. She stood up from the table and walked to the window overlooking her backyard, where my truck sat next to the newly repaired fence. I'm not looking for love, Jake. I'm not some lonely widow desperate for romance. What I'm looking for is connection. Companionship. Someone to share a conversation with over dinner. Someone who might appreciate the effort I put into cooking a good meal. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. Helena, what exactly are you asking me? She turned back to face me, and I could see courage and vulnerability warring in her expression. I'm asking if you'd be willing to be my birthday gift. To myself, not permanently. I'm not proposing marriage or asking you to move in, but maybe. Maybe we could see where this goes. Maybe you could stay tonight, and we could have breakfast together tomorrow morning and see if there's something worth exploring between us. The request hit me like a physical blow. In all my years of handyman work, I'd encountered my share of lonely customers, mostly elderly folks, who kept me around longer than necessary to have someone to talk to. But this was different. Helena wasn't desperate or pathetic. She was a grown woman making a direct, honest proposition. Helena, I said carefully, you're an attractive woman, and this has been a wonderful evening. But I don't think before you say no, she interrupted. Let me tell you something about my marriage. She returned to the table, but didn't sit down. Instead, she remained standing, her hands resting on the back of her chair. Robert was a good man. I meant that when I said it earlier. He was faithful and responsible and never raised his voice to me in 30 years of marriage. But Jake, he was also predictable to the point of suffocation. We had the same conversations, ate the same meals, followed the same routines year after year. At the time he died, we were more like roommates than husband and wife. Helena's voice grew stronger as she continued. I loved him, but I was never in love with him. Not the way I thought I would be when I was a young woman dreaming about my future. We got married because it was expected, because he was stable and I was 26. And everyone said it was time to settle down. She walked to the china cabinet and pulled out a photo in a silver frame, which showed a younger Helena and a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. They were standing in front of a Christmas tree, both smiling politely at the camera. This was our 10th wedding anniversary, she said, showing me the photo. Look at our faces, Jake. Really look at them. I studied the picture. Robert looked pleasant enough, though his smile seemed forced. Helena looked beautiful, but somehow distant, as if she was thinking about something else entirely. We looked like strangers, I observed. We were strangers. We lived in the same house, shared the same bed, ate meals together every day for 3 decades, and we never really knew each other. Not deeply. Not the way that people should when they've committed their lives to each other. Helena set the photo back in the cabinet and turned to face me again. I don't want to waste whatever years I have left living like that. I want to feel something real, even if it's just for one evening. I want to have a conversation that surprises me, to laugh at. Something unexpected, to feel desired by someone who sees me as more than just a polite dinner companion. The honesty in her voice was almost overwhelming. I could see that making this request had taken tremendous courage, and I found myself respecting her more than I had when the evening began. "Helena," I said slowly, "I'm flattered. Truly, but I'm not sure this is a good idea. Why not?" The question was simple, but I struggled to find a simple answer. Helena was attractive, intelligent, and clearly lonely. I was single, unattached, and hadn't been with anyone since my divorce 2 years ago. On paper, there was no obvious reason to refuse her invitation. "Because," I said finally, "mixing business with pleasure rarely ends well. You're my customer."
What happens tomorrow morning when we have to face each other in the daylight?
"Right. Happens next week when you need something else fixed around the house." Helena considered this for a moment. "What happens is we're both adults who made a conscious choice to spend an evening together. What happens is we either decide we enjoyed each other's company and want to see each other again, or we decide it was a pleasant one-time experience and move on with our lives. It's not that simple. Why isn't it?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fence I'd spent the day repairing. The wood looked raw and new against the weathered posts, a visible reminder of the storm damage that had brought us together. "Because you're not looking for a casual encounter, Helena. You've just finished telling me about 30 years of polite, distant marriage. You're looking for connection, for something meaningful, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to give you that. How do you know what you can give me if you don't try?" Question hung between us, and I found myself without a ready answer. Lena moved closer until she was standing beside me at the window. "Jake, I'm not asking you to solve all my problems or fill the empty spaces in my life. I'm not asking you to replace Robert or become the great love I never had. I'm asking you to spend an evening with me as if we're two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company."
Hello?
Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm asking you to help me remember what it feels like to be wanted." The vulnerability in her request was almost painful to witness. I could see the loneliness she'd been carrying. The years of going through the motions of a marriage without passion or deep connection. I could see the courage it had taken for her to prepare this elaborate birthday dinner. To dress up, to make herself vulnerable to a man she barely knew. "What about tomorrow?" I asked. "What about next month? What happens when the novelty wears off and we're back to being customers and handymen?" Helena smiled, and for the first time all evening, it looked completely natural and unguarded. "Then, we'll have had tonight, and that'll be more than I've had in a very long time." I looked at her standing there in her blue dress, silver hair catching the light from the dining room chandelier, and I realized that she was offering me something I hadn't even known I was missing. Not just physical companionship, but genuine human connection with someone who was willing to be completely honest about what she wanted and why she wanted it. "Helena," I said quietly, "are you sure about this? Really sure?" She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers warm against my skin. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I looked into her eyes and saw determination mixed with hope and a kind of desperate bravery that made my chest ache. Helena Winters was taking the biggest risk of her carefully controlled life, and she was asking me to take it with her. I heard myself say, "Okay." The words seemed to release something in both of us. Helena's shoulders relaxed, and her smile became radiant. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that reminded me of her garden. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me this." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed me softly on the cheek, her lips barely brushing my skin. It was innocent and chaste, but it sent an electric shock through my entire body. "Wine," she said, stepping back slightly. "A bottle of Cabernet I've been saving for a special occasion. Would you like some?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Helena disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear her moving around, opening cabinets and drawers. I remained at the window, staring out at the fence and trying to process what was happening. 3 hours ago, I'd been a handyman finishing a routine repair job. I was standing in a customer's dining room, having agreed to spend the night with a woman who'd just confessed that she'd never experienced real passion in 30 years of marriage, Helena. returned with 2 glasses of wine, and handed me one. The Cabernet was rich and full-bodied, clearly an expensive bottle that had been carefully stored. 2 new experiences, she said, raising her glass. 2 new experiences, I repeated, touching my glass to hers. We stood there sipping wine and looking out at the darkening backyard, both of us knowing that we'd crossed a line from which there was no easy return. The fence stood solid and straight in the gathering dusk, a reminder of the practical work that had brought us together, and the impractical proposition that was about to change everything. The wine loosened something between us. We moved from the dining room to Helena's living room, where overstuffed chairs faced a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, Helena and Robert at various stages of their marriage, vacation snapshots, holiday gatherings with people I assumed were relatives. "Tell me about your marriage," Helena said, settling into the chair across. "From me, you mentioned an ex-wife earlier." I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the dark liquid catch the lamplight. "Sharon, we were together 8 years, married for 5 of them. Met at a construction trade show in Chicago. She was working for a lumber company. I was looking for suppliers for a renovation project. What happened? Same thing that happens to a lot of couples, I suppose. We grew apart. I was working long hours, traveling for jobs, and she wanted stability. A house in the suburbs, kids, the whole domestic dream. I wasn't ready for that level of commitment." Helena leaned forward slightly. "Do you regret it? The divorce?" "No. We weren't right for each other long term, but I regret how it ended. There was a lot of anger, a lot of things said that couldn't be taken back. Sharon deserved better than that. Are you still in touch?" Christmas cards. She remarried 2 years ago to an accountant from Minneapolis. They have a baby daughter now. From what I hear, she's happy. Helena smiled. "It's generous of you too. Say it's the truth. Sharon was a good person who wanted different things than I did. There's no shame in that." We talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between topics. Helena told me about her work as a librarian before she retired, about the historical society she volunteered with, about her sister in Oregon who called every Sunday without fail. I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone about my father's final illness, about the motorcycle accident that had ended my brief career as a mechanic, about the small disappointments and unexpected joys that had shaped my life. The wine bottle emptied gradually, and I noticed Helena becoming more relaxed, more animated. She laughed more freely, touched my arm when making a point, let her formal mannerisms slip away. I was seeing a different side of her, not the polite, reserved widow I'd met that morning, but a woman with opinions and passions and a wicked sense of humor. "You know what Robert never understood?" she said during a lull in the conversation. "Why I love thunderstorms. Most people find them frightening." Exactly. Robert would close all the curtains and turn up the television to drown out the noise. But I would sneak into the guest bedroom and watch the lightning from the window. There's something about all that power, all that energy crackling through the sky. It made me feel ... alive. As if summoned by her words, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the Iowa countryside. Helena's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Perfect timing," she said, standing up and walking to the large picture window that faced the backyard. "Come here, Jake. Look at this." I joined her at the window just as a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the entire yard. The new fence looked stark and geometric against the wild sky, and I could see the trees beginning to bend in the strengthening wind. "It's going to be a big one," Helena said with obvious delight. "The Weather Service has been predicting severe storms all week." Another flash, closer this time, followed almost immediately by a crash of thunder that rattled the windows. Helena moved closer to me, not from fear but from excitement, and I could feel the warmth of her body against my arm. "Robert thought I was crazy," she said softly. "He couldn't understand how I could find beauty in something destructive. Maybe that's because you understand that destruction and creation are part of the same process," I said. "Destroyed by the last storm, but that's what brought me here today." Helena turned to look at me, her face illuminated by another flash of lightning. "That's exactly what I mean. You get it?" The rain began then, fat drops spattering against the window before building to a steady downpour. Within minutes, it had intensified to a torrent that drummed against the roof and sent rivulets of water cascading from the gutters. "I should check on my truck," I said, though I made no move to leave her side. "It's just water," Helena replied. "Besides, you're not going anywhere in this weather."
Well, she was right.
The storm had intensified beyond anything safe for driving. With visibility reduced to just a few feet and the wind strong enough to bend the oak trees nearly horizontal, even if I'd wanted to leave, and I was beginning to realize I didn't, it would have been dangerous to attempt it. "Looks like you're stuck with me," I said. "I was hoping you'd say that." Helena moved away from the window and began turning off the living room lamps, leaving only the soft glow from a single table lamp near the fireplace. The room became intimate and cozy, the storm outside making the warmth inside feel more precious. "Would you like some brandy?" she asked. "I have a bottle Robert brought back from a business trip to Kentucky. I've been saving it for ... double quotes for what? What? The right moment, I suppose. For a special occasion." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a crystal decanter and 2 snifters. The brandy was smooth and warming, with a complexity that spoke of careful aging and craftsmanship. "This is exceptional," I said after my first sip. 20-year-old bourbon. Robert paid more for this bottle than most people spent on groceries in a month. "Did he drink it?" Lena shook her head. "He kept saying he was saving it for a special occasion, but there was always a reason to wait. Not quite the right mood. Not quite the right celebration. Not quite the right moment. He died with the bottle still unopened." The implication hung between us, like the storm clouds outside. Helena had learned something from her husband's habit of endless postponement. And she wasn't going to make the same mistake. "Do not wait for the perfect moment," she said, raising her glass. "To take chances," I replied. We settled back into our chairs, but the atmosphere had shifted. The casual conversation of earlier had been replaced by something more charged, more intentional. Helena had moved her chair closer to mine, and I could see her pulse fluttering at the base of her throat. "Jake," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something else." "What's that?" "I'm nervous." The admission surprised me. Helena had seemed so confident, so sure of what she wanted when she'd made her proposition over dinner about tonight.
About
Everything. It's been 4 years since Robert died, and before that, well, intimacy wasn't exactly our strong suit. I'm not sure I remember how to do this. Her vulnerability was achingly honest, and I felt something shift in my chest.
How?
This wasn't just about physical attraction or mutual loneliness. Helena was trusting me with something precious. Her willingness to risk rejection, to admit need, to step outside the careful boundaries she'd maintained for so long. "Helena," I said, setting down my brandy and moving to the edge of my chair, "there's no script for this. No right or wrong way to feel or act. We can take this as slowly as you need to. What if I disappoint you? What if you don't?" She laughed, a sound that was half humor and half nervous energy. "You're very kind, Jake. Kinder than I expected when I watched you working on my fence this morning. What did you expect? I don't know, someone more rough around the edges, I suppose. Someone who would see my invitation as an opportunity to take advantage of a lonely widow. Is that what you think I'm doing?" Lena shook her head emphatically. "No, that's what makes this so frightening. You're treating me like a person, not a charity case or a conquest. You're making me feel like my feelings matter, like my choices have value." Another flash of lightning illuminated the room followed by thunder so loud it seemed to shake the foundation of the house. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, leaving us in darkness broken only by the intermittent flashes from outside. "Power's out," I said unnecessarily. "I have candles," Helena replied, her voice floating through the darkness. "Stay here. I'll be right back." I heard her moving carefully through the room, her footsteps confident despite the lack of light. She'd lived in this house for 32 years. She could probably navigate it blindfolded. A few minutes later, she returned with several pillar candles and a lighter, placing them strategically around the room. The candlelight transformed the space completely. What had been a comfortable suburban living room became something intimate. and mysterious, full of flickering shadows and warm golden light. Helena looked different too, younger somehow, her features softened by the gentle illumination. "Better?" she asked. "Much better." She returned to her chair, but this time she pulled it even closer to mine, until our knees were almost touching. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the house felt like a cocoon separate from the rest of the world. "Jake," Helena said softly, "would you mind if I asked you to hold me?" The request was simple, but the weight of it was enormous. I could hear the years of loneliness in her voice, the accumulated hunger for basic, human contact that went beyond polite conversation and social niceties. I stood up and extended my hand to her. She took it, her fingers small and warm in mine, and allowed me to pull her to her feet. For a moment we stood facing each other in the candlelight, and I could see the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. I drew her closer, wrapping my arms around her carefully as if she were made of something fragile. She pressed her face against my chest, and I could feel her trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the overwhelming sensation of being held by someone who wanted to hold her. "It's been so long," she whispered against my shirt. "Long. Since someone touched me like this," stroked her hair, feeling the silky texture of it beneath my fingers. She smelled like flowers and vanilla, and something distinctly feminine that made my chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Is this okay?" I asked. She nodded against my chest, then pulled back slightly to look up at me. In the candlelight, her eyes were luminous, filled with a mixture of gratitude and desire that took my breath away. "More than okay," she said. "It's perfect." She reached up and touched my face with her fingertips, tracing the line of my jaw with a gentleness that made my heart skip. Her touch was exploratory, curious, as if she were memorizing the texture of my skin. "You have kind eyes," she said. "I noticed that this morning when you first looked at the fence. You didn't just see a job to be done. You saw something that mattered to me, something worth fixing properly. It did matter to you. That made it matter to me." Helena smiled, and this time it was radiant and unguarded. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed me softly on the lips, a kiss that was tentative at first but grew more confident as I responded. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing harder than the gentle kiss warranted. The air between us crackled with possibility, and I could see in Helena's eyes that she was ready to take the next step in her birthday gift to herself. The kiss changed everything between us. What had been careful conversation and tentative connection suddenly became something urgent and real. Helena's hands moved to my shoulders, her fingers gripping the fabric of my work shirt as if anchoring herself to something solid. "Jake," she whispered against my lips, "I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid you'll think I'm being too forward. After everything we've shared tonight, I don't think that's possible." She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching my face in the flickering candlelight. "Would you come upstairs with me?" The question hung between us like a bridge we could either cross or turn away from. I could see the courage it had taken for her to ask, and the vulnerability that came with putting herself at risk for rejection. "Are you sure, Helena? Really sure? I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life." She took my hand and led me toward the staircase, pausing only to pick up one of the pillar candles to light our way. The house felt different in the darkness, more intimate, more mysterious, as if the storm had transformed it into something entirely new. Helena's bedroom was at the end of the hallway, a spacious room with tall windows that looked out over the backyard. Even in the dim candlelight, I could see it was decorated with the same careful attention to detail as the rest of the house. Antique furniture, soft fabrics, fresh flowers on the dresser. She set the candle on the nightstand and turned to face me, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "This room. Robert and I shared it for 30 years, but it never felt like ours. It felt like a hotel room where we were both permanent guests." "Helena, if you're not comfortable, no, that's not what I mean." She moved closer, her voice growing stronger. "What I mean is that, for the first time in my adult life, I'm in this room with someone who makes me feel like myself. Not like a wife playing a role, not like a widow going through the motions, but like Helena. Just Helena." The honesty in her voice was overwhelming. I reached out and touched her face, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath my palm. "You are remarkable," I said softly. "Do you know that?" She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I'm terrified and exhilarated and more alive than I've felt in decades." "Is that remarkable?" "It's brave. It's beautiful. It's exactly what remarkable looks like." Anna smiled, and I could see some of her nervousness melting away. She reached up and began unbuttoning my work shirt, her fingers trembling slightly, but moving with growing confidence. "I want to see you," she said simply. "I want to know what you look like without all these barriers between us." I let her undress me slowly, her hands exploring the planes of my chest and shoulders with a mixture of curiosity and appreciation. The candlelight painted everything in gold and amber, making the moment feel dreamlike and surreal. "Your turn," I said softly, reaching for the zipper at the back of her blue dress. Helena nodded, turning so I could access the fastening. The dress slipped from her shoulders and pooled at her feet, revealing a woman who was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with youth or perfection. Her body told the story of 50 years of living soft curves, faint stretch marks, the silver threads that ran through her hair. She was real and human and absolutely lovely. "You're beautiful," I said, and meant it completely. Helena's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief rather than sadness. Robert never said that, not once in 30 years of marriage. He might say I looked nice or appropriate, but never beautiful. Then Robert was blind. We came together slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. There was nothing rushed or frantic about our movements. Instead, there was a sense of discovery, of taking time to appreciate. Each sensation and moment, Helena was responsive and generous, giving herself to the experience completely. She whispered my name against my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin. And I found myself thinking that this was what intimacy was supposed to feel like, not just physical pleasure, but emotional connection, the sense that two people were choosing to be vulnerable together. The storm continued to rage outside, lightning illuminating the bedroom windows at irregular intervals, thunder providing a dramatic soundtrack to our private celebration. But inside Helena's bedroom, we created our own weather, warm and gentle, and filled with the kind of electricity that comes from genuine human connection. Afterward, we lay together in the tangled sheets, Helena's head resting on my chest, my fingers stroking her hair. The candle had burned lower, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and the storm showed no signs of abating. "Jake," Helena said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For treating me like a woman instead of a charity case, for making me feel desirable, for giving me the best birthday I've had in 20 years. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her shampoo mixed with the lingering traces of her perfume. "Thank you for trusting me, for being brave enough to ask for what you wanted." Helena propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at me with an expression that was part satisfaction and part wonder. "I keep expecting to feel guilty," she said. "Robert's been gone for 4 years, but this is the first time I've been with anyone else. I thought there would be guilt or sadness or some sense that I was betraying his memory, but there isn't. None at all. If anything, I feel like I'm finally honoring the woman I was meant to be, the woman I might have been if I'd had the courage to choose passion over security when I was young." She traced patterns on my chest with her fingertip, her touch light and contemplative. "What happens now?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, when the storm is over and the power comes back on, and you have to go back to being Jake the handyman, and I have to go back to being Mrs. Winters the customer." It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding thinking about. The practical reality was that we lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Helena was respected, established, a pillar of the community. I was the divorced handyman who lived in a rented apartment above the hardware store. The social dynamics were complicated, to say the least. "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you want to happen?" Helena was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "I want to see you again," she said finally. "Not as a customer hiring a handyman, but as a woman who enjoys your company. I want to cook dinner for you again, and listen to your stories, and maybe scandalize the church ladies by being seen with a younger man at the farmer's market." I laughed at that. You want to scandalize the church ladies? I've spent my entire adult life being appropriate, Jake. Being the good wife, the perfect widow, a respectable woman who never does anything to make people talk. And where has it gotten me? For years of eating dinner alone and pretending to be content with my empty, careful life. Helena's voice grew stronger as she continued. I'm 50 years old today. If I live to be 80, that gives me 30 more years. I don't want to spend them being appropriate. I want to spend them being alive. Her words stirred something in my chest. Admiration, certainly, but also a kind of protective instinct I hadn't expected. Helena was taking enormous risks, both emotional and social, and she was doing it with a courage that humbled me. What about your reputation? Your standing in the community? Helena shrugged, a gesture that was both elegant and rebellious. What about it? Not planning to run for mayor or become a nun. I'm planning to live my life on my own terms for the first time since I was 25 years old. The lightning flashed again, illuminating her face for a brief moment, and I could see the determination in her eyes. This wasn't a whim or a momentary rebellion. Helena had made a fundamental decision about how she wanted to spend the rest of her life, and she was prepared to deal with the consequences. You realize people will talk, I said. Let them talk. I've been the subject of whispered conversations. Before, when Robert died, when I started volunteering at the animal shelter, when I bought my car instead of letting the dealer's son choose one for me. People in small towns always talk. Well, the question is whether you're going to let their talking control your choices. I pulled her closer, impressed by her clarity and resolve. You've really thought this through. I've had for years to think it. For years of being the perfect, appropriate widow who never causes any trouble or makes any waves. And Jake, it's been the most boring, soul-crushing for years of my life. Helena kissed my collarbone, her lips soft against my skin. I don't want to be bored anymore. I want messy and complicated and real. I want to argue about movies and laugh at inappropriate jokes, and maybe even fight about whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want a relationship that has texture and depth, and the occasional moment of genuine surprise, even if it means giving up your reputation as the perfect widow, especially if it means giving up my reputation as the perfect widow. The storm began to show signs of weakening, the thunder becoming more distant, and the rain settling into a steadier, gentler rhythm. But neither of us made any move to separate or return to the careful boundaries we'd maintained earlier in the evening. Helena, I said carefully, I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for someone to take care of me, and I'm not looking for someone to rescue. I'm not the answer to your loneliness, and you're not responsible for fixing whatever's broken in my life? She nodded seriously. I understand that. I'm not looking for a savior, Jake. I'm looking for a partner. Someone to share experiences with, someone who challenges me and makes me laugh and occasionally drives me crazy in the best possible way. And if it doesn't work out, if we discover we're not compatible, or if the social pressure becomes too much, or if one of us decides this was a mistake, Helena considered this question with the same careful attention she'd given the others. Then we'll deal with it like adults. We'll be honest with each other. We'll try to end things with respect and kindness, and we'll both be grateful for whatever time we had together. The practical simplicity of her answer surprised me. Helena had clearly thought through all the potential complications and outcomes, and she decided the risk was worth taking anyway. You're not what I expected when I pulled into your driveway. This morning, I said. What did you expect? A routine fence repair job. Polite customer who would pay her bill and forget my name by next week. Certainly not a woman who would challenge everything I thought I knew about courage and taking chances. Helena smiled, the expression radiant in the candlelight. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? This morning I woke up dreading another lonely birthday. Tonight I'm lying in bed with a man who makes me feel like the woman I've always wanted to be. She kissed me again, soft and lingering, and I could taste the promise of possibility on her lips. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to pass. But inside Helena's bedroom, we were just beginning to explore the weather we could create together. I woke to the sound of birds singing in sunlight, streaming through Helena's bedroom windows. The storm had passed sometime during the night, leaving behind a world that looked washed clean and brilliant. Helena was still asleep beside me, her silver hair spread across the pillow, one hand resting on my chest. For a moment, I lay still and tried to process what had happened. Less than 24 hours ago, I'd been Jake Morrison, small-town handyman with a simple fence repair job. Now I was lying in the bed of a woman who had fundamentally changed my understanding of courage and desire. Helena stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw me watching her, she smiled, not the polite, controlled smile I'd seen the previous morning, but something warm and genuine and completely unguarded. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning. How did you sleep?"
Better than...
"I have in years." Helena stretched languidly, completely comfortable with her nakedness and the intimacy of the moment. "I keep expecting to feel different somehow, but I just feel... right. Like this is how I was supposed to wake up." Through the windows, I could see my truck in her driveway, the new fence standing straight and solid in the morning light. Practical world was reasserting itself, reminding me that there were obligations and realities beyond the cocoon we'd created together. "I should probably get dressed," I said reluctantly. "Check on the fence, make sure the storm didn't cause any damage." Helena propped herself up on her elbow, studying my face. "Are you having second thoughts about last night?" "No. About how we handle things from here, that's more complicated." She nodded understandingly. "The light of day has a way of making everything seem more complex, doesn't it?" I sat up on the edge of the bed, reaching for my clothes. "Helena, what we shared last night was incredible. But we both live in Cedar Falls, and Cedar Falls is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. Are you prepared for what that means?" Helena rose from the bed and walked to her dresser, pulling out a silk robe. Even this simple action had a grace and confidence that hadn't been there the day before. "Jake, I've lived in this town for 32 years. I know exactly how the gossip mill works. Mrs. Patterson across the street has probably already noticed that your truck never left my driveway last night. By noon, half the congregation at First Methodist will know I had a man spend the night. And that doesn't bother you?" Helena tied the robe around her waist and turned to face me. "What bothers me is the thought of letting other people's opinions control my choices. What bothers me is the possibility that you might decide I'm not worth the social complications." The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. Despite her confident words, Helena was still afraid of rejection, still unsure whether what we'd shared would survive the transition back to daylight reality. "You're worth it," I said quietly. "The question is whether I'm worth the risk you're taking. That's my decision to make, isn't it?" Before I could answer, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted us. Helena moved to the window and peered through the curtains. "It's my sister Margaret," she said, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "She must have driven down from Waterloo to check on me after the storm." I could hear a car door slamming, followed by footsteps on the front porch. Lena's eyes widened as the implications hit her. "Jake, I'm sorry. Margaret has a key. Going to come right in, and she's going to see your truck, and she's going to know Helena. It's okay. We're both adults. We haven't done anything wrong. You don't understand. Margaret is traditional, conservative. She's been after me for 4 years to start dating again, but she means someone appropriate, someone from church, someone with a stable job and a good reputation. Not the handyman who spent the night." Helena's face flushed. "I didn't mean it that way." The front doorbell rang, followed immediately by the sound of a key in the lock and a woman's voice calling out, "Helena? Are you all right?" "I tried calling, but your phone went straight to voicemail." The power was out, Helena called back, grabbing clothes from her closet with practiced efficiency. "I'm fine, Margaret. Just getting dressed." I could hear footsteps moving through the downstairs rooms, and then Margaret's voice again, closer now. "Lena, whose truck is in your driveway?" Helena and I looked at each other, and I could see the moment when she made her decision. Straightened, her chin lifted, and the uncertain woman of moments before was replaced by someone determined and resolute. "That's Jake's truck," she called down. "He's the handyman who fixed my fence yesterday." The storm was too severe for him to drive home safely. There was a pause, and I could practically hear Margaret processing this information. "Is he still here?" "Yes, he is." Another pause, longer this time. "Helena Marie Winters, Are you telling me you had a man spend the night in this house? The use of Helena's full name suggested that Margaret was either shocked or preparing for battle, possibly both. Helena looked at me and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before calling back, "Yes, Margaret, I am telling you that." Well, I never. What would? Robert think? Robert is dead, Margaret. What he would think is no longer relevant to the choices I make. The sharpness in Helena's voice surprised me. This was a side of her I hadn't seen before, protective and fierce when challenged. "Don't you take that tone with me, young lady. I'm coming upstairs." "No, you're not," Helena said firmly. "You're going to wait in the kitchen while I get dressed. And then we're going to have a civilized conversation like the adults we are." I was already pulling on my clothes, trying to make myself as presentable as possible for what was clearly going to be an uncomfortable encounter. "Helena," I said quietly, "maybe I should go, slip out the back door, and come back later to finish the fence work." "Absolutely not." Helena's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "I'm not sneaking around like a teenager, and I'm not ashamed of what happened between us. If Margaret wants to have this conversation, we're going to have it honestly," she finished, dressing in a simple blouse and jeans, then turned to me with an expression that was part determination and part appeal. "Are you ready to meet my sister?" "Yes." "As ready as I'll ever be." We made our way downstairs together, where Margaret was waiting in the kitchen with her arms crossed and an expression that could have frozen the Cedar River in July. She was an older version of Helena, probably in her mid-50s, with the same silver hair but styled in a more conservative cut. Her clothing was expensive but conservative, the uniform of a woman who cared deeply about appearances and social propriety. "Margaret," Helena said calmly, "I'd like you to meet Jake Morrison." "Jake, this is my sister Margaret Patterson." Extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Patterson." Margaret looked at my hand as if it might be contaminated, then reluctantly shook it with the briefest possible contact. "Mr. Morrison." Her voice was arctic. "I understand you're a handyman." "That's right. I've been doing repair work around Cedar Falls for about 12 years. And you felt it was appropriate to spend the night in my sister's home?" The question was loaded with implications and disapproval. I could feel Helena tense beside me, preparing to defend me, but I decided to answer for myself. "Miss Patterson, the storm last night was severe enough that the National Weather Service issued tornado warnings for the entire county. Driving would have been dangerous, possibly fatal. Your sister was kind enough to offer me shelter until the weather cleared. In her bedroom." The bluntness of the question hung in the air like a challenge. Helena stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable warning. "Margaret, that's enough. What happened in this house last night is between Jake and me. It's not subject to your approval or disapproval. Lene, you're being naive. This man is taking advantage of you. You're vulnerable, isolated, and he's clearly seen an opportunity." "Stop." Lena's voice cut through Margaret's words like a knife. "You don't know Jake. You don't know what happened between us, and you don't get to make judgments about my choices." Margaret turned to me, her expression hostile. "What exactly are your intentions toward my sister, Mr. Morrison?" "And my intentions are to treat her with respect and honesty, and to see where this relationship might lead." "Relationship?" Voice rose an octave. "You've known her for one day." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Helena said quietly. "Sometimes you meet someone and you just know." "It's ridiculous romantic nonsense, Helena. You're acting like a lovesick teenager instead of a grown woman with responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" Helena's voice was getting sharper. "Whom? Robert is dead. Margaret, my children, never existed. My only obligation is to myself and my own happiness." Margaret looked as if Helena had slapped her. "Your obligation is to your family's reputation, to the memory of your husband too. The values you were raised with. Those values taught me to be polite and appropriate and to never make waves. Those values gave me 30 years of a marriage where I felt like a stranger in my own life. Those values have kept me isolated and lonely for 4 years because God forbid I should do anything that might make people talk." Helena moved closer to her sister, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "I'm 50 years old today, Margaret. 50. If I live to be 80, that gives me 30 more years. I'm not going to spend them being the perfect, appropriate widow who never does anything to upset the church ladies. Helena, you're not thinking clearly. This man, Helena interrupted, makes me laugh. He listens when I talk. He treats me like a woman, not like a piece of fragile china that might break if handled roughly. He makes me feel alive for the first time in decades. Margaret's expression softened slightly, as if she was beginning to understand the depth of Helena's loneliness. I know you've been lonely since Robert died.
Ow.
But this isn't the answer. You're opening yourself up to gossip, scandal, possibly even being taken advantage of financially, Margaret. Helena's voice was patient but firm. I appreciate your concern, but I need you to trust my judgment. I'm not a child, not incompetent. I'm a grown woman who is perfectly capable of making her own decisions about her personal life. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Margaret looked back and forth between Helena and me, clearly struggling with the situation. What am I supposed to tell people? She asked finally. Tell them I'm happy, Helena said simply. Tell them I'm living my life on my own terms. Tell them anything you want? Or tell them nothing at all? It's up to you, Margaret sighed, the fight going out of her. You're really serious about this? More serious than I've ever been about anything? Margaret looked at me again, this time with less hostility and more assessment. Mr. Morrison, if you hurt my sister, if you take advantage of her kindness or her loneliness, I will make your life very difficult. Understand your concern for Helena. Mrs. Patterson, she's lucky to have someone who cares about her as much as you do. The diplomatic response seemed to mollify Margaret slightly. She turned back to Helena. You're sure about this? Really sure? I'm sure. Margaret nodded slowly, then gathered her purse from the counter. I suppose I should let you get on with your day then. But Helena, I want you to call me tonight. I want to know you're all right. I'll call you, Helena promised. After Margaret left, Helena and I stood in the kitchen looking at each other. The confrontation had been intense but necessary, and I could see that Helena felt both drained and exhilarated by it. Well, she said with a shaky laugh, that went better than I expected. Really, that was better than expected. Margaret didn't. Threatened to have you arrested or call Pastor Williams to stage an intervention. For Margaret, that was practically a ringing endorsement. Helena moved into my arms, and I could feel some of the tension leaving her body. No regrets? I asked. None at all? You? I looked around the kitchen where we'd shared dinner the night before, then out the window at the fence I'd come to repair. In less than 24 hours, my entire life had changed direction, and I was standing in the kitchen of a woman who had challenged me to be braver and more honest than I'd ever been before. No regrets, I said, and meant it completely. 3 months later, I was sitting at Helena's kitchen table watching her prepare Sunday dinner when she looked up from her cooking and smiled at me with the same radiant expression she'd worn on that stormy August night. Penny for your thoughts, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I was thinking about how much has changed since that first day I came to fix your fence. Helena laughed, a sound that had become as familiar and comforting as my morning coffee. You mean, since I propositioned my handyman on my 50th birthday? The transformation in Helena over these past months had been remarkable to witness. The reserved, careful woman I'd first met had evolved into someone vibrant and confident. Unafraid to speak her mind or pursue what she wanted, she'd cut her hair shorter, started wearing brighter colors, and had developed a wicked sense of humor that caught me off guard at least once a day. The whole town's still talking about us, you know, I said, reaching for another cup of coffee. Let them talk. Mrs. Patterson across the street told me yesterday that I look 10 years younger than I did last spring. Even the gossips have to admit I seem happy. It was true. The social upheaval we'd both worried about had been less dramatic than expected. There had been whispered conversations and raised eyebrows for the first few weeks, particularly at church and the grocery store. But Cedar Falls was a practical community. And when it became clear that Helena wasn't ashamed of our relationship and I wasn't going anywhere, people gradually adjusted to the new reality. Margaret had been the most surprising convert. After her initial shock and disapproval, she'd warmed to me considerably, especially after I'd fixed her kitchen faucet without charge and helped her husband Dave install a new garage door opener. Last week, she'd actually invited both of us to Thanksgiving dinner in Waterloo. Speaking of talking, Helena said, Settling into the chair across from me, I have something I want to discuss with you. The serious tone in her voice got my attention. Immediately. Over the past 3 months, we've developed an easy rhythm of conversation, but this felt different, more formal, more deliberate. What's on your mind? Helena took a deep breath, and I could see her gathering courage for whatever. She was about to say, I've been thinking about my house, about whether it's time to make some changes. What kind of changes? I've lived here for 32 years. Every room holds memories of my life with Robert. Some good, some not so good, but all of them tied to a version of myself that doesn't exist anymore. Helena stood up and walked to the window overlooking the backyard where my fence repair had started everything between us. I'm not the same woman who lived here with Robert. I'm not. Even the same woman who asked you to stay for dinner that first night. I've changed, Jake. This relationship with you has changed me in ways I never expected. Changed how? She turned back to face me, her expression thoughtful and determined. I'm braver now, more honest about what I want and need, more willing to take risks and try new things. Living in this house feels like trying to wear clothes that don't fit anymore. I could understand what she meant. Helena's house was beautiful and comfortable, but it was also a monument to her previous life. Formal, conservative, designed for entertaining church committees rather than hosting the kind of relaxed gatherings we both preferred. Are you thinking about selling? I'm thinking about us, actually, about where this relationship is heading and what we both want from it. The conversation was moving into territory we'd been carefully avoiding for weeks. We'd fallen into a comfortable routine. I spent most nights at Helena's house, kept some clothes in her closet, had my mail forwarded to her address. But we'd never explicitly discussed the future or made any formal commitments. Helena, what are you asking me? She sat back down and reached across the table to take my hands in hers. I'm asking if you'd like to find a place together, somewhere that belongs to both of us, somewhere we can build something new instead of trying to fit our relationship into the framework of my old life. The proposal caught me completely off guard. I'd been content with our current arrangement, happy to let the relationship develop naturally without pressure or timelines. But Helena was right. We'd reached a point where we needed to decide whether we were building something permanent or just enjoying a pleasant interlude. You want to live together officially? I want to stop pretending that what we have is casual or temporary. Jake, I love you. I'm in love with you in a way I never thought possible at my age. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night without having to worry about maintaining separate addresses for the sake of appearances. The admission hung between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Helena had said the words first, something that shouldn't have surprised me given her pattern of courage and directness. I love you too, I said quietly. I have for weeks now. But I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. Helena's smile was radiant. Really? Really? You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known, Helena. You've taught me things about courage and honesty that I never learned in 43 years of living. Then you'll consider it? Finding a place together? I thought about my cramped apartment above the hardware store, about the loneliness I'd accepted as a permanent part of my life before meeting Helena. I thought about Sunday mornings in her kitchen, about the way she laughed at my stories, about the sense of belonging I felt when she looked at me like I was the most important person in her world. I don't want to consider it, I said. I want to do it. Helena's expression shifted from hope to pure joy. She stood up and moved around the table to sit in my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck. Are you sure? It's a big step, especially with the whole town watching our every move. Let them watch. I'm tired of caring what other people think about my choices. Helena laughed. Listen to yourself. 3 months ago, you were worried about mixing business with pleasure, and now you're ready to scandalize Cedar Falls by moving in with your former customer. 3 months ago, I didn't know what I was missing. Now I do. We spent the rest of the afternoon looking through real estate listings on Helena's laptop, discussing what we wanted in a home together. She favored something smaller than her current house, but with character. Maybe a craftsman bungalow or a converted farmhouse on the outskirts of town. I was more interested in practical considerations like garage space and workshop potential. About this one, Helena pointed to a listing for a 1920s house on Elm Street, just 6 blocks from downtown Cedar Falls. It had 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch. and a detached garage that could easily be converted to a workshop. Needs work, I observed, scrolling through the photos. You're a handyman. That's not exactly a problem. She was right. The house had good bones and plenty of potential. More importantly, it felt like something we could make our own rather than a place where one of us would always feel like a guest. To drive by and take a look? Let's call the realtor first thing Monday morning. That evening, we sat on Helena's back porch with glasses of wine, looking out at the fence that had brought us together. The October air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the maple trees in her yard were brilliant with autumn colors. I have a confession, Helena said, settling closer to me on the porch swing. What's that? The fence wasn't really that badly damaged by the storm. I turned to look at her, surprised. What do you mean? Lena's cheeks flushed slightly, but her expression was mischievous rather than embarrassed. I mean, some of those boards were loose already. I may have encouraged a few more of them to come free after the storm passed. Helena Winters, are you telling me you sabotaged your own fence? I'm telling you I saw an opportunity and took it. I'd noticed you around town, knew you did good work, thought you seemed like an interesting person. When the storm damaged part of my fence, I decided to make sure the job was big enough to keep you around for a full day. I stared at her in amazement. You planned this whole thing? Not this specifically. I was hoping for some pleasant conversation and maybe the chance to cook for someone who would appreciate it. I certainly wasn't planning to seduce you on my birthday, but you were planning something. Lena shrugged, utterly unrepentant. I was 50 years old, lonely, and tired of waiting for life to happen to me. I decided to make something happen instead. The revelation reframed everything I thought I knew about our first meeting. Helena hadn't been the reserved, passive customer I'd assumed. She'd been an active agent in her own destiny, creating opportunities rather than simply hoping for them. You were absolutely diabolical, I said, pulling her closer. I prefer to think of myself as resourceful. Remind me never to underestimate you. Too late for that, Helena said, kissing me softly. You've been underestimating me since the moment we met. As autumn turned to winter, we found and bought the house on Elm Street. Helena sold her place on Maple Street to a young couple with twin babies who filled it with the kind of chaos and joy it had never known during her marriage to Robert. Moving in together was an adventure in compromise and discovery. Helena had elegant tastes and strong opinions about home decor. I had practical needs and a lifetime collection of tools. We spent weekends refinishing hardwood floors, painting walls in colors that made Helena happy, and converting the garage into a workshop that met my specifications. The house became truly ours on a snowy December evening when Helena emerged from the kitchen carrying a chocolate cake with a single candle. What's this for? I asked. It's been exactly 4 months since my birthday, since the night that changed everything for both of us. I thought we should celebrate. She set the cake on our dining room table, a piece we'd chosen together at an antique shop in Des Moines, our first major purchase as a couple. Make a wish, she said. I looked around our home, at the woman who had revolutionized my understanding of love and courage, at the life we were building together one day at a time. I don't need to wish for anything, I said. I already have everything I want. Helena's smile was brilliant in the candlelight. Then wish for more time. Wish for years and years of this. I blew out the candle, wishing for exactly that. Decades of Sunday mornings in our kitchen, of shared projects and gentle arguments, of growing old together in this house we were making ours. Later that night, as we lay in bed listening to the wind howled around our new home, Helena traced patterns on my chest with her fingertip. Jake, thank you. For what this time? For saying yes when I asked you to be my birthday gift. For taking a chance on a lonely widow who propositioned. Her handyman. For helping me become the woman I was always meant to be. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. Thank you for being brave enough to ask. For teaching me that the best things in life come to people who are willing to risk everything for the chance at something real.
Outside.
The snow continued to fall, blanketing Cedar Falls in pristine white. Inside our home, Helena and I held each other close, to people who had found love in the most unexpected place, and had the courage to build a life around it. The fence I'd come to repair that August morning still stood straight and strong in Helena's old backyard, a testament to solid construction and quality materials. But the real construction project, the one that mattered most, was happening here in our shared bed. In our combined lives, in the daily choice we made to love each other honestly and completely. Some repairs, you learned, were worth much more than the sum of their parts. Some jobs became something far greater than anyone ever intended. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, fixing someone's fence could lead to building something that would last a lifetime. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.